the late 1950s, Army engineers built a 122-kilometer navigation canal through Louisiana's swamps and marshes. The dredging of this canal, known as the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet, entailed moving more earth than did building the Panama Canal. Controversial from its very inception, the Gulf Outlet was authorized and built before the robust environmental laws of the 1970s took effect. Consequently, opponents of the project were unable to stop its construction. Completed in 1968, the Gulf Outlet was designed to provide easier access to the Port of New Orleans' inner harbor. Traditionally, ocean-going vessels were forced to travel the circuitous lower reaches of the Mississippi River to reach the city's wharves, a course subject to shifting sandbars, winding turns, and unpredictable river stages. Despite the supposed advantages of an alternative route, the economic viability of the canal was never fully realized. In 1965, before the outlet was even finished, Hurricane Betsy flooded the surrounding communities with a massive storm surge. Some citizens placed blame on the canal. To understand the ecological impacts of the project, one must understand the salinity spectrum that upholds Louisiana's coastal systems. Inland areas like New Orleans are historically freshwater cypress swamplands transected by low ridges and natural levees. New Orleans itself was built on one such ridge. Further towards the Gulf of Mexico, waters become brackish and large trees are less viable. At the coast's fringe, salt marsh and barrier islands mark the transition to open ocean. The Gulf Outlet disrupted this spectrum and introduced salty waters all the way to New Orleans' back door, destroying thousands upon thousands of acres of freshwater swamp. Cypress swamps have an incredible capacity to decrease the heights and intensities of hurricane storm surges, and thus this environmental calamity impacted not just fisheries and wildlife, but crucial storm surge buffering services that keep urban dwellers in New Orleans safe from tropical storms. By the time Katrina struck in 2005, the city's eastern marshlands were severely degraded, and the levee system designed to keep the city dry failed in dozens of locations. Environmental groups have lobbied Congress for decades to close the Gulf Outlet and to repair the damage it's caused to the coast. But the powerful businesses that use the canal were able to keep the channel open and funded for decades. But Katrina changed that. With the intense public uproar that followed the levee failures, politicians could no longer ignore the Gulf Outlet's culpability in the disaster. Congress ordered that the canal be closed to ships and demanded that the Army Corps of Engineers develop a restoration plan to readjust the disrupted regimes and rebuild cypress swamp and marsh where it had been destroyed. Additionally, a federal judge has ruled that the government is liable for certain property damages in the impacted communities. This is unfortunately a time-consuming process, but half a century of abuse isn't easily erased. The canal's closure is widely regarded as a step in the right direction, but for the fishermen and hunters who watched their livelihoods collapse into the Gulf, for residents who lost their homes and sometimes their lives, for those now facing the impacts of a massive oil spill, the measures being taken are far too modest and decades late. With climate change and sea level rise lurking, nothing short of a transformation of the region's coastlines will provide meaningful security from storm surges in the future.